Okay, so Nicola had a question for me. And Nicola, I thought, would you like to just restate both of your questions one at a time and I'll address them?
Okay, sure, no worries. So I had a question around primarily the nodes. And I don't really understand the nodes. I'm just sitting at my computer here. And my nodes, I'm just pulling up my chart. Bear with me. And I was hoping that you could help shed some light on this. So both of my south nodes are in my undefined sacral, and there it's on the screen. Sorry, and both of my north nodes are in my throat. And I had a session with a lock last year, and he said that until my Uranus opposition, I'm sort of living in a generated world, but I've looked at the nodes and I've even read the literature around them, and I just don't really understand it. So that's my first question. My other question
Well,
is,
let's just do one at a time.
okay,
Yeah, so now that you've rephrased it, it makes more sense what he's saying, that you're living in a generated world, which is true anyway. You know, I don't
yeah,
know that it's any more true. I don't bring in type to nodal analysis like that. I don't know. I don't find that useful. Um, you were already living in a generated world, you know. But
yeah.
the nodes are complicated. They really are. And I'll say a few things as to why. And can everyone mute? Or I will, yeah. One reason here, we'll look at my chart, for example, real quick here. So when you consider my mountains environment, right, and left fixed and active, that's more than just a place, right? It speaks to how my brain functions, right? So mountains people tend to smoke or do something to deplete the oxygen in their brain, right? Um, and the implications of that, there's health and healing implications to that, right? So for example, breath work, which is essentially hyperventilation, is contraindicated, right, for mountain people, right? Categorically, mountain people should not be doing breath work. And things like, psychedelics, mushrooms, microdosing, these sorts of things are good for mountains people because they deplete the oxygen in the brain. Alcohol increases the oxygen in the brain, right? So the nodes aren't just where you're at and what you're paying attention to, right? They actually indicate something about how your brain functions. And actually, it's the north nodes here and the south node here. I mean, this has a lot to do with the brain development. This has a lot to do with our thinking and conceptualization, right? So the nodes are tricky. And actually, I believe the very last thing that Ra really was teaching and introducing were the link nodes. And we did that, a month or so ago when I started doing these Q&As. We looked at link nodes and all the implications. According to Ra, that was the creme de la creme of human design, was link nodes, which hasn't really caught on. It's kind of funny that he thought that. So the other thing I would say, just by using my own chart as reference, Nicola, is that I'm going through my Uranus opposition now. It was officially in July of this year, and it's certainly been topsy-turvy. But I have been in, well, would anyone like to take a guess? Does anyone here feel comfortable describing what I've been paying attention to with gate 49, line 3? Would anyone like to hazard a guess? Just think about the different layers here. What do we know about that? Well, we know it's in a stream that has to do with touch and sensitivity, right? We know it's tribal. It's also in the mystical circuit, right? And what's gate 49 about? Yep. Name said trial and error principles. Absolutely. Yep. But if you had to place me somewhere, where am I at? What am I doing? What am I engaged with? Right? What was that first half of my life journey about? Bonds made and broken, community, spiritual communities. Yep, we're getting warmer. We're getting more specific there. So I have a trial and error process with different spiritual, i.e., mystical communities. That was very much the case. Right? And do I accept that community or do I reject that community? Or does that community accept or reject me? Right? Goes both ways. Right? I've kicked people out as much as I've been kicked out, it goes both ways. And it's a third line, so it has to work. Third line represents the material plane, right? It's the third line plane. It's also a demon realm, which is a second color thing, but it's a third line material plane. So it has to be a spiritual orientation that actually works in the real world, right? That's certainly what I've been looking for, right? So if we take that same logic and we jump back to Nicola, what could we say about, and let's see here. Nicola, you're 39, is that correct? So are you pre-Uranus opposition? I can look here.
Correct. Yeah, pre. It's a couple years away, 2, 3 years away.
Okay. Would anyone like to hazard a guess about what Nicola has been paying attention to and experiencing with gate 14, line 6? And what's the first thing we should be doing to check that out? How do we really answer that question? We can't, unless you happen to know that line keynote off the top of your head, what should we be doing? It's a 6th line, which means what?
Detachment.
Yes, that's correct. Yep. Next gate on the wheel. Thank you, Name. Mentalist trainings are paying off. Okay, so what is the next gate in the wheel? We're looking at 34, right? So that's really interesting, right? Now, why is that really interesting? Because this 14 is all about these power skills, right? So I've done readings for people who have like a 14 personality sun, and it's all about just pouring their energy into the right work. And it's, getting certifications. What are those power skills? What can lead to generating capital, So it's power skills. And what is it looking at? Well, it's looking at this gate of power. What kind of power? What kind of power is 34? It's not just any type of power. What kind of power specifically?
Is it building power? Self-power.
Yeah, there's definitely building power. That's one thing. But let's think about looking at the entirety of the integration circuit, right? And what's that all about? Got a couple answers in here. Self-power, survival. Yep. Yep. Anyone else? So essentially, it's the power to survive as oneself, right? The power to differentiate and survive as oneself, right? To behave as oneself, right? This is, to survive by trusting your intuition, right? To be busy surviving as oneself, it's all of that. So what this 14.6 is really looking at is, well, the power skills required to survive as oneself, right?
Oh my God. That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Okay. So we're looking at the personality south node to gather that. Gotcha.
Exactly. Right. And you'll find that you have, there's lessons in learning here, right? In all of this for you, right? And these two are, this is a polarity, right, in the wheel. And so ultimately, like, those power skills are going to lead to making a contribution. Once again, we have to open up the mandala and see, well, what comes after gate 8, right? And if you see it, shout it out, because I'm not finding it.
23?
Nope, it goes the other way. So 20.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Right.
20.
So what's interesting is that these two gates, right, that form a polarity, are both looking at integration. How do I be my differentiated self? How do I survive, become empowered, right, to survive as my differentiated self in the present moment? That's so key. That's so much of what you are looking at. And here you are in human design. I mean, that is basically the the gist of what human design is all about, right?
Yes.
Waking up.
Yeah.
We're talking about waking up here too. Waking up as myself, right? Being empowered, surviving as myself existentially, right?
Do you find that sort of intensifies or strengthens as you approach the Uranus opposition? That urge to
Yes.
make yeah.
Yeah. So my experience has been, so first off, I'm 43. I got into design when I was 33. So I was after my Saturn return. And so this is the first big cycle, shift that I have experienced with eyes wide open, right? With an understanding of the mechanics. And it's been very interesting to go through it. And thank God I have the information that I do. Otherwise, you beat yourself up about things and take things personally that aren't. But I did find that a couple of years leading up to it, it felt like the path was being paved. Things were lining up, right, for what ultimately happened, over the past several months. And so, for example, and just to make this less abstract, let's look at my chart. And here we go. So it's a cross of tension, 4-6 in the cross of tension, right? And so, I'm bringing tension to my community, my network, right? As a fourth line, wearing this fourth line layer or costume, for the next several years. And I definitely saw, a community forming, a network forming, particularly in the human design space, a few years before it happened, right? And then obviously I have a heretical take on certain things. And so that's the tension. I definitely can really identify the 4th and 6th line themes in my psychology right now. It's really interesting. It's almost like there's another passenger, kind of with me. Like I feel the 5-1 stuff and I feel the 4-6 stuff too, right? So absolutely, there's a ramping in and there's a ramping out before the next cycle. So.
Wow, that's quite an interesting chart there.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of individual circuitry, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're definitely a ways off. So I would not expect you to experience anything this far ahead of it. I think it's maybe, a year or two potentially.
Okay.
That was my experience.
The quickening.
Yeah, a quickening.
Yeah, okay.
It's a great way to put it. Yeah, a quickening. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that help
That's
clarify things?
super, super clarifying and super helpful. Thank
Great.
you. Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what about your other question?
Yeah. Okay. So last week, is what sort of inspired this. So I was asking about another chart, and being single definition like mine, with just one channel, and wondering what the, like, where a conditioning factor might be, without having a bridging gate or anything like that. And you went to the personality sun, um, other gate.
Come
So
on.
it's
Yep.
59, which is the gate of sexuality essentially. And I just wanted to, and I expanded on that in my message to you. So in asking the question, I was sort of thinking, well, how might I sort of be quite focused on sexuality, or, in a semi not selfie way. And what what I've been thinking about it over the last week, and I always thought it was sort of like daddy issues, because I will be out and I'll be looking at people, a couple or a group of people or anyone really, and I'll just be thinking about them and their sex life. Like, I really enjoy the taboo of this, and I like to sort of know things, maybe it's a fourth line thing or something, and when I meet men, I think, oh, I wonder what they're like in bed, and are they thinking about me like that? Like it, and I just thought, geez, like, is this, I always just sort of thought it was a weird daddy issue thing that I had to get over. But now I'm wondering, like, is it just this gate 59 that's quite prominent in my life?
I think that the truth of that is something that would have to be like responsibly, it would have to be sussed out in sessions, to really see where you're at with that. Because,
Yeah.
categorically, there's nothing wrong with having fantasies and, and being interested in
Mm.
sexuality and wanting to explore different aspects of your sexuality. So let me just comment on a few things. It's a very sexual design in a sense. At the same time, you're a projector, right?
Yeah.
So there isn't that energy that's consistently there. There can be mental preoccupations with sexuality with projectors. I don't feel comfortable drawing grandiose sweeping conclusions that I've seen prevalent in social media, such as projectors are sex addicts. That's just too big of a statement for my taste. That's just not how I operate, right? I can't go there. But certainly with your personality sun in gate 6, gate of conflict and intimacy, looking at the sexual role gate, then sex is certainly on your mind. And that is one of the ways that you're going to overdo it as a projector, right? You're also, of course, going to overcare and, try to find your habits and your rhythms and all this kind of thing. And you're going to get lost in the details, so all of those things are applicable, but because this is across from your personality sun, this is the biggest, area of wisdom for you and challenge and learning. And especially because, the 36 here also has sexual fears. It feels sexually inadequate, and it has sexual curiosities. It can be kinky. It's, this whole stream, right? The human experiential way is potentially kinky and curious. And, how can we have sex? Let's explore all the ways that we can do that as human beings. Why not? I can relate with it personally. This is an impersonal collective gate, right?
Mm.
So,
Mm.
um, so I would expect to find people who are really into, into S&M and things like that have, you know, something going on in this stream, right? Something going on in that.
Mm.
So it's all about, and you're on the Eden, and I'm thinking this is Eden. God, I want to say it's 3 because I came across an Eden 3 the other day.
I think it's 3.
Yeah, I think you're 3. And so some Edens really are more sexual than other Edens, depending upon where the personality sun is. But, the common thing with Edens is all about, it's sort of like, is this life? Is this as good as it gets? Pretty tough down here on planet Earth, So
Mm.
there's some sort of a crisis, right, that you underwent as a child where you sort of fell from Eden. And it can range, and look, everyone's got their shit, but there's some sort of defining moment, and it could be parent lost their job, or we suddenly moved. I was really happy in the school system and had a great group of friends, and all of a sudden I'm jerked, across the country in high school. It could be any of those things, loss of a parent. And with 6 lines in your personality nodes, you certainly grew up with vulnerability. This can often be, it can look like a range of things. It could be elderly parent. It could be, someone in your family, close circle who is sick in some way. 6 lines are vulnerable. So that is part of what you're going to be around and noticing. But the whole thing about the Eden trip is it's sort of like coming into the fact that life doesn't have a reason. It's about being, right? It's just about being. It's about having this experience. And that can be a difficult journey, for Edens to embrace. But certainly becoming wise about sexuality is a part of your life, Nicola, but you have to get the balance right in terms of being so centered, in your splenic, ego authority there, that you don't overdo it. It's perfectly, normal and natural for this design to be curious about that, to have a lot of questions, and to maybe even be able to guide other people, sexually. Yeah. Does that help and answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And it's something, I mean, I've had a lot of short-term things and flings and whatnot through my life, particularly in the first 30 odd years. And it's all been as a result of alcohol. And I've been sort of, alcohol's not been agreeing with me as much lately. I used to drink a great deal. And that would sort of tear everything down, and you just kind of, like my ability to discern is no longer there, of course. And but I've been like not really had many long-term relationships in my life as well, which is really interesting. So I'm really just hoping that I can continue on this path of, well, I want to meet someone and be friends with them, of course, is the 4th line. I mean, that's something I've been dying to do, and I've just never, alcohol has always stepped in, rushed things along sexually, and it never sort of progresses to anything. So that's sort of where I'm at, and we'll see what happens next.
So I'm circling the 6 lines here. You appear to have 8. So let's take a step back.
Yeah.
So again, continuing the thread here with your nodal journey, another thing that you're noticing is you're spending time with disassociated people. Right. So disassociated people can be people in a spiritual community who are bypassing, but it also can be alcoholics. Right? That's
Whoa.
6 lines check out, right, in their pathology. They don't want to be. So one of the things going on in your design, right, is it's difficult to be on planet Earth as a projector, right? Because you're in a generated world, regardless of what's going on in your nodes. Then you're in Eden, and there's already been this kind of, your spirit's been crushed in some way, right? And 6 lines, just even if you weren't in Eden, right? I've lived with 6 line children and got to witness their process coming into their teenage years. And a lot of it is innocence lost, right? Because there's a continuity with a 6 color, right? Innocent, even at that line level. There's an innocent in 6 line profiles, innocence there. And what I observed was a bit like, oh God, like people are mean, the world's tough. Like, God, there was a lot to process for this young child, coming into his teen years. And I'm sure you had your own version of that. It seems like 6 lines always do, right? And of course, your journey is going to have a lot to do with the wrong friendships in the first 30 years, and that you're going to be beleaguered by the time you're at your Saturn return, and you're going to kind of just take a step back, right? And just be more interested in evaluating and being cautious before you throw yourself in again and, all the things, right? All the troubles that ensue. But 6 lines have this tendency toward drug use in that sense, because it's a checkout, because it's a way to leave planet Earth. It's a way to leave reality. It's a way to not be in the body where the pain is, right?
Yeah.
That's a disassociation. And so you have quite a lot of that. Now, I actually see that stress, you've got so much 6 line stuff going on. I'm sure that you handle stress by going into your head. That's one thing that's happening, right? Another thing happening while we're on the topic of stress is it's got to be building up in your back, your bones, your legs, something like that. Something at your foundation level is taking a toll from the stress as well.
Yeah.
But yeah. So let's bring this to what can you do, right? What's the secret, what's the solution to this disassociation? And it's really somatic practices. It's really somatic practices, and somatic practices might be extremely boring for you. And
They do get boring. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they're really freaking boring, aren't they? I mean, they just are. They're boring, and the whole world is bored right now. The whole world is bored because Neptune's in 36, looking at 35, right? Which has to do with boredom. And so I know you get bored. And one of the things you're doing is I'm going to resolve my boredom through some hot new sexual experiences. And
if I don't get that, I'll eat chocolate.
There you go. Right. This can be, I'm going to take a drug. It could just be as mundane as I'm going to go out to eat. Nothing wrong with that. Of course, everything should be coming from, an embodied choice, right? As opposed to just scratching a mental itch. But, sex can be one of the favorite go-tos to, change up the situation and alleviate your boredom. But boredom is one of the final frontiers to being, right? You can't really be totally comfortable in your own skin until you can just be bored, right? Not be bothered by the fact that there's no stimulation. So for you to your full integrity, right? For you to be authentic, you have to learn to be bored, and you have to learn to be in your body. And the embodied practices are going to be boring for your mind. They're going to be, and that just is what it is. And because the whole secret to 6-line disassociation is in touch cognition, right? Touch cognition, in addition to the acute somatic awareness that it has, like, ooh, what's the clothing feel like on my body and all this type of stuff, right? In addition to that, it is this perception, this awareness of, are we in touch, right? And why is that the case? Well, that's the case because it correlates with the 1949 and 3740, all this communal stuff, right? Touch cognition, people, it's a tribal cognition. It's like, are we together? Are we a tribe? Do we support each other? Are we being good to each other or not? So it's all about you being in touch with yourself. When you're in touch with yourself and you can live in the mundane boredom of life, those are prerequisites to being a role model of the mundane, who you can just come as you are, and you naturally relax people because they can see that you have self-acceptance, right? You can come as you are, so they can come as they are. What we don't want is performative role models. And that's what we mostly get on social media. We get a lot of 6 lines wanting to show some sort of fucking sexy life, right? It's not that. There's a performative coping strategy in that 6, right? It's the theater of what I think a role model looks like. No. It's about the everyday, boring, mundane, and your capacity to be embodied and just be really natural in yourself, in your own skin. And everyone can feel that, the atmosphere around you just relaxes because you're relaxed inside, right? And the other little hook here, the other little catch here is self-love is elusive for you, right? Elusive for you. and you don't want to make that a project. There's nothing you need to do for self-love. You just need to disregard the thoughts that say there's a problem with yourself, right?
Mhm.
There's no effort there. There's no formula for self-love. It's just disregard all the thoughts that say, there's anything wrong with you, right? That's a Neptunian trap. So I want to take a little pause here.
That's just incredible. Thank you. Honestly, the boredom piece is that new and spot on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have any comments about how I approach that and the conclusions I'm drawing? And is this all making sense?
All of everything you said about the 6th line, totally. I have 9 6 lines, was like on the nose for me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to be incarnate as a 6th line, right? It's hard to be in the flesh. It's hard to really be embodied, and drugs are one means to not have to do that, to not have to experience that. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone have any questions about this? There's a lot there, and I jumped around to a lot of different topics. I want to make sure I didn't lose anyone.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So,
By the way, could you pronounce your name for me?
yeah, it's Hiske.
I'm gonna say this wrong.
It's like his, like the, what do you call that? Is it a pronoun? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm Dutch, so English is not my first language.
Yeah, I saw that you tagged me the other day or a week or two ago, and it was in another language, and I was like, I don't know what she's saying. So
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that. Yeah, it was probably positive.
I was hoping. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, that I was having sacred responses to your questions in something that I was listening back while I was taking a walk.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was wondering, so I don't know much about the notes, but since you were saying like her notes are in the 6th line, does it also mean that this is something that, like the mundane part you were saying, and the boredom and working with that's something that's gonna be around all the time, or is it mainly based on the other lines?
Okay, so just to make a distinction here, the boredom isn't to do with the 6th line. Apathy can be.
Oh, it was the 35. Sorry.
Yeah, the 35. But apathy, she can be surrounded by apathetic people,
Mhm.
That's one thing. Also role models, right? She's here to see who are the role models, who are the people who are just checked out, who are the hypocrites, who are the really authentic people out there. That's what she's seeing, that's what she's experiencing, that's what she's getting wisdom about. Wisdom needs to be, it's not just about open centers. There's wisdom in learning how to live with our chemistry. There's wisdom through what we're learning through our nodal journey. There's wisdom all over the place, right? So that's part of her wisdom, is like, who's a hypocrite, who's full of it, and who's really the real deal, And especially as a very perceptive projector with only one motor, right? The weakest motor of all, Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Would 6 line design nodes have the same feeling?
I wonder that. It's been something that I've been trying to sort out. I don't 100% know the answer to that question. That is more of what you're kind of surrounded by unconsciously. I would say it would have to be. But I really can see it, with people in their personality nodes.
Yeah, my nodes are 6 line, and I've definitely been surrounded by hypocrites a lot of my life.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like, where did this come up? It was a conversation on Facebook. I think it was someone who had mafia people around them, throughout their childhood. And guess what? One of their design nodes was gate 50, line 4, corruption. I should check out my parents. My parents have a weird habit of like living next to mafia people, or it's a weird, they've rented a house from a mafia person and then they were confused for those people. Then we live next to this mafia guy that anyway, it's all kinds of stories. I haven't looked at where that's coming from in their charts, but
Wild, fun.
James's parents' mafia connections. Yeah. Apparently James Alexander was even it was like an Irish terrorist or English terrorist or something like. My dad got hassled for it back in like the 80s or 90s. So yeah, all kinds of weird stuff with that. Anyway, yeah, what other questions do we have? What
I
else?
had sent you one in a Discord DM.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, but I sent it not that long ago. If you have time today.
Oh, okay. Sure. Let's see. I have a friend, they've been struggling with heat hives and feeling lazy. I've pointed them to their PHS, but 9 months of experimenting hasn't had much success. So I was curious if you could take a look and see if there's anything else that might be helpful. Okay, yeah, I can do that. All right, let's see what we've got here. Okay, so we know that Kyle is cold thirst, right? Needs to consume foods below body temperature, right? Yeah, is interesting because this is his transference here is the artificial shores. So let's take a look. So I do not see, so he's got heat hives and feeling lazy.
The heat hives for like 9 years, and he can't, like, he does, if he breaks a sweat at all, it's just misery.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not, I would expect to see something with design Venus that I don't see, or you say heat with design Mars. That's not obvious. I'm not exactly sure what to attribute that to, although it could just simply be his stress response. I mean, one thing I can say about his stress response is his breathing is affected. So he's either hyperventilating or forgetting to breathe. I don't see anything else that jumps out at me in terms of that. He definitely has different systems, health systems that are affected by both PHS and the environment. So it is significant for him. Now, 9 months is not that long of a period of time.
Yeah.
PHS is really something we really, track more so in years, right? I wish I could be more helpful in this one, but yeah, what I would expect to see is not the case. So, yeah.
Interesting. Well, the double struggle, I feel like has, I don't know, just a theme.
The double struggle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have one comment, which is just that I've been surprised at finding people that have very defined spleens having health issues, because as an undefined spleen, my kind of imagination is, wow, this person is like a super paragon of health with so many splenic channels. But I think that's really not the case. I think the splenic channels are putting certain obligations on having to do certain activities to maintain health. And with 5 splenic channels, that's a lot of things to do to sort of maintain that health. So I don't know if you have any comments on that, James, but I kind of see the channels as obligations, and this person kind of needing to do a lot of things. And then also being quad right. It's so funny seeing the surface mechanics being so splenic, but then the awareness being so far removed from the spleen. It's like couch potato kind of awareness and environment, but the need to be really aerobic with all this splenic stuff.
Yeah. Right. What I tend to see in terms of illness is that illness shows up in the definition, right? So I can think of many cases, like one simple example would be this person I know who only has this channel of initiation, right? Where we've got, the gallbladder here, and he had to have his gallbladder removed, so projector, not living correctly, etc., got sick in his definition, had to have the gallbladder removed. So I tend to see it actually shows up in the definition eventually. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fears here that this person is experiencing. I mean, is that apparent in your interactions with Kyle Pockets?
When they were younger, yes, but as they've gotten older, I
Mm.
don't get the fears from them. But like I've known this person for like 12, 14 years now. But yeah, as they've gotten older, I don't see the fears, more frustration. I definitely see frustration, especially with the heat hives and the feeling like I have all this energy, but I don't want to do anything. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, fear is really big for this person because not only is it a super defined spleen, but their number one open center is a fear center, is an awareness center, right? So in the underpinnings of kind of how this person is thinking, right, and maneuvering in the world, it's very much about trying to stay safe in a world that is emotionally overwhelming. How do I keep the peace? Well, I'm going to be really polite. I'm going to be loyal. And if you overwhelm me, I'm going to cut you out of my life.
Yes. Yes.
And, highs and lows, looking for the spirit, right? Spirit in human design is not metaphysical as much as it's more like holiday spirit, team spirit, kind of a thing. Yeah. So.
Well, thank you for taking a look.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Continue experimenting with them, and we'll see.
Yeah, my only last comment on that is just the difficulty of when you have these splenic activations that really have a built-in mechanism for what Ra would characterize as doing the laundry and purging toxins and so on. And there's a mechanism there. In this case, there's actually 5 mechanisms. And those 5 mechanisms all kind of need to be used. And it can be hard, especially if this person is actually in pain when they exercise, because if they break a sweat, they're getting a problem. But that's a catch-22, because without exercising, they're never going to be healthy, because this spleen requires a lot of exercise. And more than exercise, 5710 requires sculpting of the form, chiseled form, being like a model, being thin, having a certain fit body. This integration circuitry does not need extra fat on their body. That's going to be a huge problem if they have this extra fat on their body. 5734 needs to be a lean, mean, fighting, survivalist machine that can go out camping for a weekend and just live off of grubs and stuff. 4426 is going to require a lot of, I always think of the spleen as sweating. They're going to require a lot of sweating over their creative output and getting all that energy moving. Ra's son had half of the 2838 and they got a dog with the other half, and his son's health improved because he would struggle with the dog playing tug of war. That 2838 needs to have tug of war. It needs to sweat in struggle in some sort of aerobic way. And so if this person is having devastating hives when they're being aerobic, and yet their body has these 5 aerobic channels, that's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that other than it's a virtuous cycle of making incremental changes. I mean, I'm a cross of healing, so I'm always going to preach, pacing, determination, incremental improvements, all of those cross of healing things, loving your body that you have. But yeah, no, that's going to be a real issue, and just finding things that they can do dietarily, finding things in their environment, and finding ways to use those 5 splenic channels is so important, because if those channels aren't used, their life force energy is going to rot on the vine, and it's going to make it worse. So that's the real challenge here.
Yeah.
And then being quad right. And so it's an awareness that is not, it's attuned more to feeling. In fact, not only quad right, but all 4 of the right variable placements are in the solar plexus binary. So this is like the rightest of the right. This is the
Yep.
extreme right variable.
Yeah, which Jonah, I think that this is an edge case. There's an interesting dynamic here to sort out between this person who has a splenic generated authority, needs to exercise every day, and yet particularly with the perspective you've developed from Steve Rhodes, this is a person that also really wants to chill with all that solar plexus binary tonal stuff, right? Like they have hedonistic tendencies. They want to relax. Is that not correct?
No, that's absolutely correct. And that's kind of an
Uh-huh.
interesting question of how do you reconcile the mechanics of the surface with the awareness beneath the surface. And we have these stereotypes of the right variable being the couch potato, especially right variable in the nodes, on the design nodes, what Ra would call the kind of classic couch potato, but then also having this spleen that needs its exercise and it needs to sweat. And here's someone who actually is having hives when they're sweating. I mean, what an interesting, I mean,
Yeah.
my heart goes out to them because that's a really difficult place to be in, where you are caught between being this fully receptive, fully as far removed from the spleen as possible when it comes to your awareness and your environment,
Yep.
and yet also having this kind of fundamental need to use those splenic channels.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is to point out nothing's wrong. There's a way to live this, right? That was probably quite natural, to Kyle as a child, and somehow it got lost in the conditioning. A clue here is I look to cognition for clues about convalescing, right? So there's energy. This person could both be a transmitter or receiver of energy healing. Energy healing might really serve them.
Yes.
So
Yes. They practice Reiki. Reiki. Like
that would,
they're a Reiki master for like 15 years, I think.
yeah, that would totally make sense. I mean, with this, again, quad right, all the solar plexus binary stuff, feeling cognition. The other thing I would add, because we do want to get some movement in this person's life, and I don't want to, this isn't like advocating what is that crazy workout that everyone does? I can't even think of the name of it, but it's more about
CrossFit.
CrossFit. Yeah, exactly. Like I don't see this person doing CrossFit. That's not what I'd advocate. What I'd be curious about is, do they respond to something like Qigong? You're moving energy, right? This person needs to move their chi, it's stagnating, and maybe something's building up and that's why they're getting these hives. And, like there needs to be some movement, but it needs to be movement that works for someone who's very passive and receptive and solar plexus binary, all that. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And there might be other forms of exercise similar to that I'm not aware of, but like that, I think that is something that would be worth presenting to him.
I will do that. Thank you. Thank you both.
Yeah, you're welcome. Nicola suggested swimming. Yeah, low impact. Yeah. 4426 had skin issues. Yeah. Okay. Time for maybe like one more question before we wrap up for today.
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe you've already, I don't know. Okay, I'm just gonna ask it. So you want my chart? That's maybe easiest.
Do I have? Yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, you don't have it. Yeah, it's 14th of October. So 14, 10, 90, 89. Time 1742. Country, the Netherlands. Yeah, and Amersfoort. I will type it in the chat.
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
So my question is about my variables on the design side. I just find these variables, I don't know how you say it, so confusing because there's this, I don't know. For me, they totally go into each other. I find it really hard to navigate.
Mm. Yeah, the crisscross
Mm-hmm.
applesauce. Yeah, you know, I did a post years ago on Facebook where I tried to map this all out. You might want to just search for, I'm not sure, I haven't looked at it in a long time, but you might want to search for me in Catalyst and see, but it got a lot of attention. But it is tricky to kind of reconcile all of that. Like, do you have a specific, I mean, one thing I can say is, so I'm reverse of you, right? I'm a right brain, left body here. And so what I have found, and here, I just want to jump to my chart just to, because I've definitely resolved some health stuff by understanding this better. So as you can see, I'm 3 parts left, but my brain is right. If you're going to have one part right, that's really going to make a huge impact. I mean, it's the brain, right? And so what I found was that particularly earlier this year, I was like building this analyst training. I would work 8 or 10 hours some days, like on classes and stuff like that. And obviously human design is very logical, analytical work. I am designed for that type of work. You know, I have the channel of logic and my, you know, I'm very logical, my incarnation cross, so on and so forth. But with that right brain, there'd be a point at which I overdid it. And then my brain would kind of, it was almost like a muscle that was overworked. It's difficult to explain. Like if you know what I'm talking about, if you have a right brain, maybe you can relate. But it just felt overexerted and it would just kind of spin out. And then I found that as the day came to a close, I really wasn't able to sleep because I'd overworked my brain doing intellectual stuff and being sedentary when I'm really meant to be active, right? So when I shifted the balance and I got plenty of exercise in throughout the day, and I can still do intellectual work, but I need to kind of find that balance. And a lot of it with the right brain is actually channeling stuff, which just means things occur, right? It's not any mystical process. It's just things show up, right? As I engage, right? Rightness needs a creative outlet, right? So when the class was cooked, you know, and the baby's ready to come out, you know, I would engage with the material and things would show up with my right brain that I really didn't know I knew. You know, I really got to see what was inside of me when I made the course, right? I knew somewhat, but I didn't know the full extent, right? So it's all about the balance between activity here, don't overdo it there. And then you're the opposite, right? So, you know, for you, you need to be fueling that left brain throughout the day. Make sure you have, you know, high caloric intake. You know, if you're doing a lot of intellectual work, you need to make sure you feed your brain, but you need to be sitting down, right? So like, for example, when I give like public talks and stuff, I'm a pacer, you know, I'm always walking and pacing, and that's my left body there, but you're not that. You need to sit down, you know, and then with the right mind, I don't know why this tool keeps dropping on me. So sit down, right? Be more sedentary, right? And have someone, you know, let's just say you're giving that public talk. Have there be a moderator or some sort of facilitator that pulls it out of you, you know, while you're relaxed and sitting, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
That also makes so much more sense. Yeah, I had one, I did a couple of live events, and the one that I was standing, I felt very powerful, but I was very unsatisfied. And then I did a 3-day event and I was sitting most of the time, and it was so satisfying.
So
And there, it was way more in the flow and getting people to pull it out of me instead of having like a strategic, I guess, setup plan.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's one of the ways I reconcile charts, you know, when there's question between is it a right or left mind, brain, whatever, you know, it's can you get up there and monologue and, you know, or do you need more of a dialogue, right? When I show up to do a reading because I have a left mind and a left view, like it's a monologue with pauses, and those pauses allow people to ask questions and pull things out of my right brain. Right. But for you, I would say that the monologue would be somewhat challenging. It'd be better if someone was pulling it out, right? And
Absolutely.
you're able to relax.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, so sedentary. This always fucks me up. Sorry for my language. Because also I notice my body needs a lot of movement. So that's the
Yeah.
same conversation you were just having.
Same. It's the other side of it. And so it's all about balance, right? Like, I mean, differentiation is really about living into these tension points, right?
Mhm.
Most people on planet Earth aren't living into these tension points because we're still pretending like we can live a rational, logical life, right? And the tension points kind of are uncomfortable from that perspective, right? They're illogical, they're irrational. Like, you know, how do you have innocence motivation but the channel of initiation, right? That looks like a contradiction. Actually, not a contradiction, but it looks like a contradiction. You know, these sorts of things. Or how do you have, you know, what if you had a first color here? What if you're a survival view and you've got this need motivation? Looks like a contradiction. You know, how do you have innocence motivation in some leadership channels, right? Well, the world doesn't have any innocent leaders, you know, not that I can think of, right? But you need to just find that balance between, yeah, I need to move every day, you know, and you're in the ajna binary there, you know, so it isn't as, and you are here too, and yeah, I mean, you've got this one solar plexus binary element there, which is why the, you know, plenty of sitting. But, you know, I was in a relationship with someone that had the 3420 and their only right element was the environment. And, you know, busy all day, but really needed to, well, let's say busy all day. I think it was a balance of start the day slow, watch some TV, do some activities, be busy throughout the day, and then end the day, you know, on the couch, unwinding, etc. You just have to find the balance.
Mhm.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
love these apparent contradictions because it's like living into that is really what makes this interesting. You know, that's differentiation, you know?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
just have one more point. You touched on the binaries. There's no splenic binary anywhere in that whole configuration. So even though it's a mix of left and right, it's the leftness is still closer to the right. Like you don't have any tones 1 or 2. And so it's just kind of an interesting point as well, like having the third and fourth tones for your sun earths being ajna, being so much about relating to other people, connecting to other people, very social, the ajna binary. And then, yeah, only having ajna and solar plexus binary in the nodes.
Yeah.
So,
This binary is also can be moralistic. So I don't know if you identify with that, but it can be moralistic.
Could you speak on that a little bit?
Well, I don't know what else I could say. It's just there's moral judgments that are there, right?
Yeah, I guess
In
that's
the
true.
yeah, in the ajna binary, right? And you know, it's all about who looks good, what looks good, etc. Like you're concerned with beauty, you know, you're especially also it's a continuity with perfected form here. I would expect you have a beautiful home situation. I mean, if you know, if you have the means to do so, you want your environment to be beautiful. You want your food to look good. And sometimes you meet someone and you just think they look funny and you don't really want to get to know them. And
Mhm.
maybe you've judged that, but you know, it's your unconscious, it's your brain's way of protecting you and ensuring that you're only relating with people that are correct for you, right? Which it knows visually, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun ride.
Yeah. It's a fun ride. Yeah. That's good.
Cool, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'll work on that balance.
Yeah. Okay. Well, everyone, I think that's a good stopping point. Good to see you. Good to be with you. Happy holidays. And
Thanks so much, James.
yeah, you're welcome. Take care. Enjoy the week. And
Thank you guys. It's nice to see you or hear you.
Nice to see you, or nice to hear you, Stephanie. Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.